Hello, everyone. Patrick and Mary, thank you for joining us, and everyone who is on Facebook Live and elsewhere. Yeah, we're here. We're at our first day of our Renew You series, which is going to be a monthly series of webinars aimed to educate, empower, and inspire the people in our community, both patients and also non-patients as well. So I'm glad you guys joined us. Today we have Dr. Nicholas Yap. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Yap with us. It was a long journey for him to officially be announced as a chiropractor serving our patients here at Total Body Health. But we're super stoked to have him as an outstanding practitioner, but also an outstanding human being as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Yap. And once he's done his presentation, I'm happy to engage conversation with any of you guys listening. And we will post this on YouTube after the fact if anyone wants to access the recording as well. So again, thank you and enjoy the talk.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was very kind of you. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dr. Nicholas Yap, and I wanted to kick off our first Renew You webinar series by talking about the power of consistency. But consistency specifically with forming healthy habits with exercise, rehabilitation, and daily movement. I chose to talk about consistency today, specifically because this framework is not only effective for creating healthy habits around exercise or injury rehabilitation, but this framework can be used in many other aspects of your lives. I found that being consistent with a new practice or a new habit can be extremely difficult because obstacles, such as life, can arise and slow us down. But we all tend to start with similar goals in mind. And what I mean by that is we all want to be stronger, either to be more active, you'd like to get rid of your chronic back pain, or just get out into the world and maybe run more. But where things tend to fall short is not that we've loosened our grip on trying to achieve our goals, but rather the process in which we achieve those goals may not be the most appropriate. In other words, our goals are typically not the issue, but how we go about achieving those goals are. So today, we're going to discuss the different strategies that you can start implementing tomorrow to help bring you closer to your goal. So let's begin. I like to start by talking about what is consistency. The Oxford Dictionary defines consistency as this quality of always behaving in the same way or having the same opinions, standards, i.e., the quality of being consistent. Consistency also means focusing on the task at hand in the present moment while maintaining your overarching long-term vision or goal, whatever that may be. When we do something regularly, we get feedback from it. This feedback helps us to alter or modify course as appropriate, especially when we're dealing with an injury. So consistency really is, therefore, all about repetition. It's about repeating the same actions, habits, and rituals over and over again, gaining feedback from those actions, and adjusting or pivoting accordingly to help you stay on track as you work towards your goal. Now, before I dive into the strategies for habit forming, I want to talk about this wonderful book by James Clear titled Atomic Habits. This presentation is very much inspired by my readings from the book, and I have to share, I'm reading this book again through the second time, and I'm picking up things that I missed the first time. But I'm going to condense most of the information in that book for you and talk about 5 strategies for habit forming that you can start to implement tomorrow. So let's talk about the first one. Make it obvious. One of the simplest ways to facilitate your desired habit or change or create a new habit is simply to change your environment. Now, I say simple, but simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. For example, you want to start walking regularly or you'd like to get back into running. You can change your environment by setting out your running shoes at the front door or in a place where it can serve as a visual reminder every time you walk by or every time you pass by. Another option that you can use is to leave yourself sticky notes, either on the mirror in the mornings when you get ready or on your coffee machine if you're a coffee drinker like I am. And be kind to yourself. Leave yourself nice messages like, hey, don't forget to walk today, or hey, don't forget to go on a hike or go down to the beach and breathe the ocean for a few minutes. You can also reinforce your intended behavior or habit by creating accountability checkpoints. For those of you who have roommates, or if you live with your spouse and you all share the same goals, bring them into your healthy habit journey. The reason why this is helpful is because accountability partners can foster many positive emotions associated with said intended behavior, which ultimately can lead to a higher likelihood of repeating that behavior. An example I like to share for this one with regard to the accountability partner is join a run group. A lot of times, humans, we tend to gravitate towards a sense of community or camaraderie. And so if you have, you can look this up either in Facebook or maybe on your local news posts, whether or not you have a local run group in the area. I know of a local run group here in Victoria, Fernwood Run Group, where they run 3 times a week. They pick a specific location and then afterwards they meet for coffee. So when you have these communities who share the same goal, or in other words, these accountability checkpoints, the likelihood of you repeating or performing that behavior tends to increase. Now, aside from making it obvious, you can also flip the script for getting unwanted behaviors or getting rid of negative habits by making it difficult. For example, you'd like to spend less time on your phone on social media. Set a time limit. Now, for those of you who have smartphones or iPhones like I do, you are aware that the iPhone has a specific app or a time limit app that lets you know, hey, you've hit your time limit for the day. In my personal experience, I don't find the time limit as useful. However, I think that it's a great place to start because the time limit not only serves as a reminder, but it gives you a moment of self-reflection. For example, if you've been on your phone for 2 hours, the phone will go bing, 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 you've hit your time limit. And in that very moment, you can decide, do I want to ignore that limit or do I want to keep scrolling? What happens afterwards, we're not going to get into that, but what I'd like to share really is that moment of self-reflection is sometimes enough for you to take a step back and think, maybe I think I've had enough for today. You want to watch less TV? Increase the number of steps it takes for you to perform that activity. So, for example, put your TV remote in the garage or maybe somewhere in the backyard. That way, every time you need to access that television or watch your show, you have to take several steps to get to that behavior. These are just some kind of out of this world examples I like to choose. Again, I like to use this really just to drive a point. And lastly, you want chocolate chip cookies? Try making them yourself instead of buying them. I know this is the most far-fetched of all, but believe me, sometimes making cookies is much better than the ones you can buy outdoors, especially if you get them at the regular grocery store. So, in other words, want to change a negative habit? You can make it harder to access, you can increase the number of steps needed, and you can make it difficult, which is just the opposite of making your habit obvious. Next, make it attractive. In the book, they talk about temptation bundling. And temptation bundling is where you pair an action you want to do with an action you need to do. This is a pretty good strategy to help reprogram your brain to enjoy difficult habits and in turn making them more attractive. For example, say you want to watch Netflix and you know you need to do your rehab exercises for your lower back pain. Reframe. Tell yourself that you're going to do half your rehab routine, watch an episode, and then finish your other half after that episode. And then if you're feeling great, go ahead and enjoy another episode. I think the simple reframe here is important because it helps you pair and bring into light something that you want to do with something that you know you perhaps not necessarily need to do, because I think that's a little bit extreme, but rather should do. Many associate exercise with being an activity that is draining, takes a lot of effort to do, or wears you down. And this is especially true after a long day at work, from my personal experience. But the language here is important. Instead of telling yourself, hey, get off the couch and go for a run, you lazy, say, it's time for me to work on my running endurance or my running cadence. Hey, it's sunny out. I should go for a walk and breathe the ocean air and do some active meditation, rather than telling yourself sort of this negative language. So a simple reframe is really quite effective in making something that is less attractive a little bit more attractive. The key here is that we try to steer away from the I need to versus the I get to. Now, I like to share this quote here. The thing you least want to do in that moment is probably the thing that can make you feel better afterwards. I find this to be true with walking or with light exercise, and more so with hiking. I love Mount Doug. I have yet to have a bad experience after hiking Mount Doug. I always feel an increase in energy and sort of bursts of endorphin release and just a sense of peace. I like to share this quote that I heard from Dr. Maxwell, and I'm going to take a page out of his book here. And I heard him say this to one of his patients, and he says, have you ever gone out for a walk, came back afterwards and thought, man, I really regretted going for that walk? When I heard him say that, I thought to myself, I can't remember the last time myself or those around me, even my patients, said to me, I feel worse after that walk. Now, context here is important. If you're dealing with a foot injury or an ankle injury, of course, walking can potentially aggravate it. But more times than not, we rarely feel worse after a walk. So thank you for that, Dr. Maxwell. Next on the list, make your habit easy. Habit formation is the process where a desired behavior becomes a little bit more automatic through repetition. In other words, consistency. Now, the amount of time you spend performing that habit is not nearly as important as the number of times you repeat that habit, because consistency, in other words, is through repetition. Therefore, the time you spent doing something isn't necessarily as important initially as compared to how often you give opportunities for yourself to repeat that habit. We as humans naturally gravitate towards strategies requiring the least amount of work and effort. This is true today as we see in technology. Everything is a little bit easier with less effort and less work. This is actually also very true in our bodies with regards to movement. We are extremely good at compensating, and we are outcome driven. Can you remember the last time you wanted to pick something off the ground and thought really hard about how exactly you were going to complete that task? Chances are the answer is no. If you want to pick something off the ground, you're going to pick it up off the ground without really thinking much about how you're going to move your body, how you're going to maneuver. And this is also true if you're dealing with an injury. Your body will find the path of least resistance and least amount of pain and discomfort in order to achieve that task, regardless of how you do it, whether it be the best way or the worst way. Most times it's not necessarily the best way, especially if you're dealing with an injury, because we're compensating through other regions of the body. But we are very much outcome driven. So one of the ways to make your habit easy is to simplify it. Say you had a long day at work and you would really like to get a workout in because you've been on a good streak, or you haven't, but you'd like to start. Simplify it. You've got a 30-minute routine, and instead of committing to the entire 30 minutes, maybe try committing to a third of the workout. Heck, you could even commit to just one full set of an exercise from that routine and call it a day. Again, in the early stages of creating healthy habits, the amount of time spent doing that habit isn't necessarily as important as the number of times you repeat that habit. The effort to be consistent is far more potent than the actual workout itself, because it serves as a reminder that even in the hardest of times, especially after a long day of work, you can show up and do something for yourself. Because eventually, this consistent practice will evolve to a point where you now know to pair a difficult or bad day with movement or exercise. And as a response, you get this endorphin release, this sense of reward, and just a sense of satisfaction because you've just contributed a piece to your overall goal, whether it be run a 5K or be workout 3 to 5 times a week. I love this quote when I came across it in the book, because this quote is true not just for exercise and rehab, but for many other aspects in our lives. Walk slowly, but never backwards. Next, for your strategy to create healthy habits is to make it satisfying. Reward your efforts. Positive emotions cultivate habits. Negative emotions destroy them. If you have pets or a puppy, you know this to be true with training your puppy, specifically with treats. You want your dog to sit a habit, you reward them by giving them a piece of treat, i.e. creating a positive emotion. And you want them to stop a habit, then you, as a response, either it be a no or perhaps a verbal punishment that creates a negative emotion. Therefore, it prevents that habit from coming back again. This strategy with making it satisfying ties back to the temptation bundling that we talked about earlier. Whether it's that pumpkin spice latte that you love, or really I love, or yummy pastries from your favorite bakery like Crust for me. The point is to reward yourself for showing up and committing to your habit. I'd like to note, however, initially when creating these healthy habits using these strategies, is that the type of reward is not necessarily as important, because the goal here is to practice consistency and repetition. However, over time, as you get better and better at repeating your habits and creating this consistent practice in your daily life, it's important to note that the short-term reward, like your pumpkin spice latte or a large Domino's pizza, will eventually need to change into something that reinforces your identity once you've established consistency. I like to add, however, large Domino's pizza isn't a bad thing, but it can be if you eat it alone in one sitting, like I did several weeks ago. I do not recommend. For example, the pumpkin spice latte initially that serves as your reward, making your habit a little bit more satisfying to complete, can eventually turn into a massage or a chiropractic appointment, or even better, running shoes, new running shoes, if your goal is to run. Because these rewards help contribute and reinforce your new identity of someone who takes care of their body and is invested in improving their health. With respect to the effects from exercise, the intrinsic rewards like feeling stronger, more stamina, more confidence in your own body in your clothes, an increased energy, and just a better overall mood can eventually make the cookies or the pumpkin spice latte less attractive over time because it doesn't fall in line with your new and evolving identity. So those are the 4 points to create strategies on how to habit form. And next, I like to talk about the 2-minute rule. But before I go into the details, I want to talk about exactly how this happens. So when we dream about making positive change within ourselves, excitement arises and we often think big. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but what tends to happen is that we start way too big. In other words, we do too much too soon. A perfect example of this, and I myself have been a victim of this, is New Year's resolutions. New Year's resolution to run more or get back into the gym again. A lot of times during the New Year's, specifically after Christmas, with spending time with your loved ones, cookies, cakes, sweets, all the works. And come January, you've made a commitment to yourself about wanting to either lose weight, gain more muscle, improve your running economy, whatever that commitment or goal may be. In this new state of excitement for this new venture of renewing yourself in the new year, you get to the gym and we either do way too much on the first session, or we have this expectation that we can repeat the same workout we used to be able to do a year ago or even 2 years ago, only to wake up the next morning and feel extreme soreness in your entire body to a point where returning to the gym later that week is just a big no. In this scenario, we have effectively turned a positive behavior, such as engaging in exercise to better oneself, into one that is somewhat negative in the form of severe muscle ache or soreness, or in the worst case, a potential injury, which can then lead to a negative emotional response like, gosh, I hurt everywhere, or this is my favorite one. This is why I don't go to the gym anymore. I've had a number of my family members say this to me after right around mid-January after going back to the gym because they've simply done too much too soon. Now, I'd like to take us back to the beginning where we talked about it's not the goal we have that is the issue, but how we go about achieving that goal may not be the most appropriate. And in this case, too much too soon, the process in achieving that goal was just simply not appropriate. So what this does is it ties a negative emotional response to a positive behavior like exercise for change. When this happens, it reduces the opportunity for us to practice consistency, which creates more barriers to develop healthy habits like daily movement or meditation. So, meat and potatoes of the 2-minute rule by James Clear. When you start a new habit, it should take you less than 2 minutes to do. Bear with me here. 2 minutes sounds a little crazy, but I'll explain. I love this rule because the 2 minutes allows you and myself the flexibility to develop effective strategies around repeating your healthy habit formation. Because the goal here initially, when you start something, is to increase or maintain the number of repetitions that you repeat that movement and not so much how much time you spend doing that movement. I'll give you an example. Say your goal is to run a 5K this year. I believe the TC10 is coming up, so you could change this to a 10K, but we'll stick with this for now. Say your goal is to run a 5K. Start small using this 2-minute rule. And you can do so by just simply putting on your running shoes and either walk around the house, whether it is to break in your new hokas, or walk around the outside, like around your neighborhood, perhaps. If you live around, I'm not quite sure where, but the neighborhoods here aren't that big. It maybe will take you 5 minutes to walk around the block. Eventually, this simple act of putting on your running shoes and walking for 2 minutes at a time will turn into a 5-minute walk around the neighborhood. And then a week or two later, 10,000 steps a day, to eventually a walk, 5K, and then achieving your goal of running a 5K. Although it may feel quite weird or awkward at first to just do 2 minutes of an activity and then take off your shoes and call it a day, over time, the consistent act of showing up, putting on your shoes, going for that 2-minute walk will help lead you to your desired end goal or your behavior, the one that you'd like to reinforce. More importantly, specifically with an exercise routine, because you've progressed in a stepwise manner, you avoid potential episodes of delayed onset muscle soreness, or in the training world, we like to coin this term DOMS. It's where the scenario I gave earlier, where you do too much too soon one day at the gym, and then you wake up the next day and you are experiencing DOMS to a point where you have to support yourself just to use the restroom because your legs are so sore, and there's no way for you to go back into the gym the next day or even the day after, because DOMS can last up to 72 hours. But you also avoid potentials for injury, either from overuse or over repetition, or repeating a workout that you thought you used to be able to do, but because you have been potentially inactive, your muscles and your tendons aren't necessarily ready to withstand that load, therefore creating an injury. But specifically, you're avoiding barriers to achieve your healthy habit. Show up for yourself because you are so worth it. Now, I'd like to share with you how showing up helped me. I had a New Year's resolution this year, and that was to work out 3 times a week at a minimum. I did well for my first 2 weeks in January, but like I mentioned earlier, things and obstacles such as life tends to come, and life eventually got busy for me. I found myself prioritizing other things like rest, family time, and connection with my family outside of Canada. And I was putting my exercise routine off to the side, my daily movement off to the side. Week 3, I started to feel restless in bed, and I noticed that my sleep quality suffered because I was getting 6 to 7 hours of sleep, which is normal for me, but I would wake the next day not feeling rested. So I knew that the quality of my sleep was affected by my recent inactivity. I felt tired and exhausted from everything else, but I always remembered that I felt happier and more energized after a workout, even after a 10-minute walk outside. Now, I had just finished a particularly difficult day at work, and I felt that getting a workout in was just what I needed, but I did not have it in me to do so. For those of you that are watching, if you can relate to this, great. If not, thumbs up to you. I mean, it took everything in me to go to the gym, but I knew that I just had to show up. The rest was not as important. So I showed up to the gym. I walked into the locker room. I got dressed, and then I left the gym shortly after that. So the amount of time spent doing the activity is not as important here, but showing up and repeating that activity is. So the next day after work, I told myself I'd show up to the gym again. But this time I would say, I'm going to show up, get dressed, do my warm-up, and then leave. My warm-up took about 6 minutes long. And after my warm-up, my body was warm. I had a little sweat going on, and I started to feel a little bit more awake. I feel this sort of burst of energy starting to kind of, come to me. And so I decided to stay and do a 10-minute workout. I have a 30-minute regular workout routine that I tend to repeat 3 times a week, but this time I only did 10 minutes of it, and then I left. So the takeaway message here is to show up for yourself and be surprised by what you can achieve. I certainly surprised myself. I surprised myself that I got to the gym on that first day, put on my clothes, and then left the gym afterwards. And I surprised myself again the next day after telling myself I would only do my warm up and then leave. But after my warm up, I thought, heck, I'm already here. I'm warm. I'm feeling this burst of energy. Let's take advantage of it. And so I stuck around and did 10 minutes of my workout and then I left. And eventually I got back into my 3 days a week routine. And now I tend to fluctuate between 3 and 5, depending on how the week goes. But the point is show up for yourself because you're worth it. So I like to close here to talk about two really important overarching things to keep in mind as you work through these strategies to create healthy habits. And the first one is be kind to yourself. We are not perfect. We are bound to make mistakes. And the easy thing to do when mistakes happen is to either quit altogether or start something completely new 2-3 weeks later. Mistakes are opportunities to learn and opportunities to reflect. It doesn't happen right away, and you may make the same mistake again, but be open to it, acknowledge it, and carry along. Don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake along the way, because consistency doesn't equal perfection. If in case you miss a day at the gym, or if you did what I did, which is finish a large Domino's pizza by yourself, don't do that. But encourage yourself to start again the very next day, which is what I did. I woke up the next day, felt like crap, and I thought, today will be a good day to go to the gym. And so I did. And lastly, be patient with yourself. There is unfortunately no quick fix for forming a healthy habit or replacing a bad habit. One of the most effective ways to change your habit is to focus not on what you wish to achieve. So it's good to have your overarching goal in sight, but you don't want to fixate on your goal, but rather you want to focus on who you wish to become. And that includes your identity, which is ever evolving as you move through your healthy habit journey, but more specifically, the strategies or the process in which you go about achieving your overarching goal. You will need to be flexible with yourself because effective habit forming requires you to continuously change your beliefs, get feedback from your actions, and pivot accordingly to suit your personal needs. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to join us for this first of our Renew You webinar series put on by our amazing team here at Total Body Health. If you have specific questions about my presentation, I've left my email address down on the bottom right corner of your screen there. You can send me emails about this question, or if you'd like links to purchase this book, I highly recommend it. We also have an audiobook version for those of you who like to listen to podcasts, or you can listen to this book while you're walking, hiking, or maybe on long drives. But that's it from our presentation today, guys. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And I'm going to pass the mic back to Dr. Maxwell.
Thank you, Dr.